My name is Alan, and you are listening to the Sound Speeds Podcast, episode 11. And I should add that this is going to be the first episode of the new era of the podcast. I'm not going to be doing a six-parter anymore. I'm going to be doing two different parts. The first one is going to kind of be a flex, whatever I feel like discussing, and the second one is going to be some sort of a story. Now, I'm going to do 10 episodes of this faceless format, and we'll see how well it goes. And I'm not going to commit to any kind of a time frame. We'll see what happens over the course of time. If this episode goes over well, then I might do another one next week, or maybe 2 weeks from now, or maybe 3 days from now, since we are still on shutdown here and the film industry is not working. But regardless, that's going to actually take me into our first topic. So I should go ahead and say the words, which are, it's Memorial Day Monday, May 25th, 2020. Let's get into it. It's been 2.5 months since the government shut down the United States of America, and those non-essential workers like yours truly have been sitting around wanting to work and do something. Now, you may say, why haven't you been producing more videos on Sound Speeds? Well, believe it or not, I've had a lot of stuff going on. It's amazing when you have time off, how quickly that time goes away. My children were in school, but they were then going to be doing homeschooling, essentially, because they have what's called digital learning days, where you learn from home and you do schoolwork from home. And that kind of is getting a little bit ahead of everything, but I will revisit that topic here in a moment. But I do want to talk about the future of entertainment, and I'm going to use that as a segue into it. And I know you might think that's kind of a poor segue. I mean, if this was on the radio or something, that would be an ultimate fail. Yes and no. Believe it or not, I think everything is completely intertwined. And this coronavirus thing has changed quite a bit. Now, I do want to say before I go on that all of the opinions and speculation that you're going to hear is completely up in the air. I mean, it's subject to change. It's not even necessarily truth. These are all my opinions. And I'm able to state my opinions simply because I have done a little bit of research. Being that I'm on the inside of the film industry, I kind of have a little bit of a unique perspective regarding what entertainment's going to be and how it's going to be. Now, if you are one of these people that says, oh, well, you know, the movie industry's dead. People haven't been able to see a movie in the theaters for 2.5 months. It is one of those things where it's dead. Well, okay, let me go ahead and address that real quick. If that's the case, then we might as well go ahead and say, well, live events are completely gone too. You have no interest in the world in seeing your favorite bands perform live ever again, right? You have no interest in ever going to another play. You have no interest in going to a public place like a swimming pool or going any place in particular. If plays are your things, if sports events are your things. This the context that I'm going to put this in. Whatever you're interested in doing in public, are you basically never going to do that again? If you're not someone that's interested in movies, fine. Don't go see movies in theaters. Maybe you have spent a lot of money setting your home theater up and you have a nice big flat screen TV and a 7.1 THX surround sound system and you have best gigabit streaming services and everything. Well, fine. This is not obviously going to be something that you are interested in. But even those people, I'll tell you this, many of the people that do still have home theaters, they like to go to things like the big tentpole movies, the Avengers, the Marvel movies, the DC comic book movies, the Fast and Furious movies, the ones that spend a lot of money on big time special effects. You can sure watch that in your house with a couple of people around you, and it's cool, you know, being able to eat what you want and how you want to do it, but still, you know, the phone rings and you're going to hit pause, or you might. I don't know. Maybe you have a little bit more discipline than that. Let's hope. But what I will say is that there is still no substitute for going to the actual movies. And you may argue this, and so I'm going to basically discuss this a little bit more into depth. So if you are not someone that likes to go to movies, for example, then you really don't have a stake in this or a say. I mean, I guess everyone technically does have a say in it, but I think that if you didn't go to movies before, you're probably not going to care one way or another if the movie industry starts back up. You may argue, like I've had a conversation, you know, a couple of nights ago with some people about entertainment, and every single person seemed to say, no, I think the era of movies is over. Really? Okay. Well, let's talk about this. Now, I mentioned essential workers a little while ago. Well, with this whole shutdown thing, people have been at home, right? Well, what have they been doing? Reading? Doing homework? Well, yeah. Playing video games? Sure. But the idea of essential workers is one that kind of lends itself to what is considered to be essential. Sure, you could say getting food is essential, okay? But then why are Home Depots open? Why are Lowe's home improvements open? Why are places that basically, I mean, sure, I understand groceries, but then they still have grocery stores that are open and you can go in there. There are mail places that are still open. You can mail things. They haven't shut down everything, luckily, where you're stuck with only the USPS. I mean, but it's kind of selective in what is considered to be essential and what is not, isn't it? I mean, with everybody home and watching television, aren't film people considered to be essential anymore? I mean, when have we never been more essential? Aren't we considered essential since everyone is watching television and binge watching television and movies on home on their streaming services? This is one of the reasons why Starz is advertising $25 for 6 months. They've been trying to do this as a promotion to get people to sign up now because in a few months, they're going to be flooded with people still who are addicted to their service, hopefully, and not wanting to leave their streaming service. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself yet again. So let's talk about the future of movie theaters. People have been saying it's too expensive. Okay. Well, let me first of all discuss 20 or so years ago. The big trend was we went from, seats where people were sitting in front of each other. And if you were just a regular sized person sitting in front of another person, you're not going to be able to see the screen. So the big thing 20 years ago was stadium seating. And then a little bit later, they decided they were going to increase the quality of the screens and the sound. So they started upgrading those sound systems and screens. Then they said, oh, well, people, in order to keep people from coming, from staying at home and watching these movies, we're going to take this to the next level yet again. And we're going to start doing like easy chairs that you can recline, recliners. We're going to have it fold up arms so you can snuggle someone while watching a movie. And then they said, well, geez, people aren't happy with eating popcorn and drinking bathtub sized thing of soda. Okay, so why don't we have real food options? And then they said, well, geez, that's not enough because people are still having to sit in line for, a good 45 minutes to an hour and a half just in order to get a decent seat in the theater. Okay, so why don't we have people be able to select the theater that the seat that they want in the theater, and then they can basically just walk in last second, sit down, and enjoy the movie if you want to spend the time to book it in advance, which I know a lot of people do. Personally, I enjoy doing that because I have 2 small children, not necessarily small anymore. They're both, one's preteen and one's teenager, but I do have one that's younger, and if she is going to be sleeping at night, and we have a babysitter at the house with the older 2, we would prefer not to have to leave an hour before we really want to see a movie and sit in the line just for no real reason. So what my wife does is she pre-buys the tickets online, and then we have this down to a science. We leave the house right at about 20 minutes before a movie starts. We drive for about 10 minutes, arrive at the movie theater, spend the next 2 minutes or so getting into the place, having the tickets taken, or rather you hold your phone and they scan it now. Then we stand in the stubs line. And then we get our snacks, and within the next couple of minutes, we have gotten everything we need to enjoy the movie. We sit down just as the opening preview is about to happen. And that's a really awesome thing. And it's something that we really can't thank people for enough. But yet, movie theaters have had to take it to the next level because people have been wanting to see more things at their house, and it has to justify them going to the movie theater. So if you say movie theaters are too expensive, that's one of the reasons why, because it is completely turned into something where it is all about the experience. Now, you could say, let's do away with movie theaters and just do video on demand. Trolls made $100 million in video on demand. But then I want you to think about this. People couldn't leave their houses, and they've been advertising Trolls for a long time. And so if you have a situation like that, people are going to want to see this movie Trolls. And if you put it on video on demand, sure, people are going to want to go see it. And that's one of those things where people have been very excited about seeing it, so of course they're going to go see it. Now, you could make the same argument about things like Sonic the Hedgehog and Onward. Why didn't they do a video on demand? Well, Sonic the Hedgehog, even though it had been in the media and been a big, huge hype for months and months before, people didn't like the original design of Sonic, and so they freaked out. Then they re-rendered it, and then the articles about how good he looked now. So if that's the case, and it's in the media, you suddenly release the movie, why didn't it do well? The reason why is because about a week later, everything shut down. So as soon as the movie was starting to do well in theaters, it got shut down. And Onward was the same exact way, except that Onward was only in theaters for a couple of days. And they had been talking about that one for a while too. So there was a huge amount of money lost on both of those 2 features, but Trolls, Universal did not want to see Trolls do badly in theaters. So they offered it as a video on demand. Now, you could just say, well, that's great. It's the future. People are going to want to sit at home and watch their movies. No, people just wanted to see Trolls. That is a very, very, that's the exception. It's not the rule. People are not going to want to go see every single little animated movie on their home system just because it is first run, especially when you can wait 2 months and buy these movies from Amazon or something. You can very easily do that and get it for half the price. So if that's the case, then why don't we just have no bother, don't even bother with video on demand. Why don't we just do it where everything is a complete home release on iTunes or, Disney Plus, and, have everything just be a home video release? Well, it's because people don't want that, believe it or not. People like to actually go out. They like to have the experience. It's still a date thing. Come over to my house and watch a movie at my home theater. That sounds kind of creepy. Hey, can I take you out for dinner and a movie? That's tried and true, man. That's something we've been doing for a long time. Now, it would be one of those things that you could say Trolls did so well simply because of video on demand. Would it have done as well in theaters? No way of being able to tell. But here's what we can tell. Universal is now talking about only continuing to release movies and video on demand going forward. Okay, so you want to talk about that game. Theaters have been breaking even for a while now. Costs, and costs are the big reason why. I mean, there's a lot of money in the distribution and paying for the first run rights on these particular movies, right? I mean, you go out into a movie theater and you say, I'm gonna see this movie and I'm gonna pay my money and I'm not going to buy concessions. Well, movie theaters not making much money on you. We all know that movies make their money off of the concessions. And considering that ticket prices have been going up and up and up, you might think that that's something that the movie theaters are, making more money on. Not really. A lot of it is in licensing, being able to play the movie first run. Now, sure, there's a lot of upkeep too. I mean, keeping air conditioning in the summer and the heating on in the winter does cost a lot of money because you want to have the big grand experience. That's one of the reasons why having the multiple food options and having the nicer seating is pulling people in that want the experience. Okay? I keep saying that enough. It is the experience. It was, as I mentioned before, I don't need to go into it even more about the stadium seating, the booking ahead, the food, all that kind of stuff. But here's what I do want to say. Movie theaters don't have the money to create. They don't have the money to produce movies. They are exhibition only. Okay? Many old school directors, Quentin Tarantino, Martin Scorsese, these guys, and not to mention the actors themselves, love to have the whole red carpet events, the big premieres at the Grauman Chinese Theater in Hollywood. They like to have the big experience of going and seeing their movie on the big screen. And it's not just going to die out when those guys die out. There's a whole culture about that whole thing. The after party is a big thing. The whole building up and having this as a big, huge media circus to advertise the movie. That's all a big event. That's all a big time thing that people look forward to doing. And that's not going away. Now, that's not to say that there's going to be a lot less theaters and people are just going to be having the one theater that is only good for premieres and then everything else is going to be video on demand. That's not to say that. Because if you think about this, there was a Paramount decree back in 1948, I should say. And what this basically meant was that the studios were trying to own theaters to exhibit their own films. But when studios made movies and they distributed it and then exhibited it, that was considered to be a monopoly. Because the only way you were going to be able to see those movies at the time was to go see it in the theater. There was no home video. Ampex didn't even release the first VCR just yet. I think, if memory serves, it was released in 1955, or that was the first time we at least had a VCR. This was before that. The predecessor before that. You couldn't watch a movie on television. You couldn't watch a movie, on your home video or even on your phone. Geez, the idea of watching something on a phone is crazy. But yet in 1948, this was considered to be a monopoly. So it was outlawed, and there was a law put up against it saying that you could not exhibit a movie that you produce and distribute. You can't own all the different levels of that. You could own the exhibition. You could own the producer, producing the movie. You could own distribution. You can own actually two of the three, which is one of the reasons why Disney is able to use Buena Vista Distribution to distribute to theaters. Or I should say, they're starting to do things a little bit differently. There's a big push to lift that, and here's why. Are we violating the law right now? Now, what do I mean by that? Streaming services. Streaming services right there. Disney Plus. If they want to say, for example, that they want to play a movie on Disney Plus. I worked a few days on the movie Noelle. That was a Disney Plus only movie. It did not show in theaters. We shot the movie and then it came out distributed directly to Disney Plus, which you have to have a membership in order to get to. Now, imagine if streaming services were to buy movie theaters. Okay? So let's just say that Stranger Things was going to have a marathon and Netflix Theater was going to be putting that out. Or if Disney owned their own theater and decided to do a marathon for The Mandalorian 2 days before it, or let's just say that the entire series was released, as one big streaming thing, or maybe not that with The Mandalorian, because The Mandalorian, Stranger Things, it could be binge watch maybe the entire season a day before it came out and people would jump all over it. But Mandalorian was released every single day for weeks on end. So that could be a subscription thing. You want to buy the Mandalorian pass, it's going to be $150 and you have to have a Disney Plus membership, but you get to see The Mandalorian at the theater every Friday before it's released on Saturday or something. Let's just throw that out there. And if YouTube wanted to do that with something like Cobra Kai, they could. Netflix, imagine if Netflix were to say something like, we're going to release The Tiger King in the theater, or like Ozark or Game of Thrones was going to be shown in theater. Geez, could you imagine seeing those shows that were produced mainly for streaming or for a television network? The quality of those shows up on a big screen, could you imagine something like that? There's already memberships to things, not just Disney Plus, but like I mentioned, Stubbs membership. My wife pays, what is it, $85, $90 a month? Or a year? A month. That would be terrible. But if we pay that kind of thing, you want to have some benefits, right? Well, you do get that back in the form of discounts to concessions. And sometimes she's given passes if she gets in quick enough to see up to 4 passes for free to see a brand new kids movie or something. So she and my 2 older daughters maybe, and maybe one of her friends all go see the movies in the movie theater. There are benefits to having these memberships. But what if somebody like YouTube said you have to have YouTube Premium? Disney Plus said you have to be a member of Disney Plus, or you had to be a member of Hulu if you were going to watch their content, not just on their services, but in theaters. Because if you didn't, the price might be double. And so, like, if you wanted to go see a Marvel's Avenger movie, let's say, or let's take it to the next level. Let's say Star Wars. You want to see the next Star Wars movie? Then you're going to pay a $10 more per month or per ticket cost unless you have a Disney Plus membership. They could easily do that if they wanted to. They need content for their services, though. People have been pulling information or pulling shows, I should say, off of Netflix. So Netflix originally started and you could get it and, pay your fee and get a movie sent to you and you'd watch the movie, you'd send it back in, keep it as long as you want to, as long as you pay your monthly subscription. But then they started offering the streaming service too. When that happened, people were able to get instantly the movies that they wanted to. Now, not all of them. Some of them are still on the DVD or Blu-ray service that they offer now. I don't even know the last time I've heard of somebody that actually does that service, though, anymore. But if you subscribe to Netflix and then you wanted to see a movie at the next Netflix theater, that would be one of those kind of cool things, right? They could offer that. But because they have so many people pulling their content off so they can launch their own streaming services, now there's a big rush and an interest in people creating content. I mean, Netflix and YouTube and everyone else, they can produce content, but not to the level they need to stay afloat. And if Netflix is going to try to continue to be a viable option for streaming movies and television shows, they got to have content. And every other company out there that wants to have their own streaming service like HBO and Disney Plus, Hulu and everybody, they have to now have content because there's not some one central hub where you use for all streaming services like Netflix was for quite a while. Disney Plus has been up at this time for only a matter of a few months. Yet people are already saying they're out of content to watch on Disney. There's only so many times you're going to be able to watch Beauty and the Beast before you're going to get sick of it. Sure, you know what it's like, but you might watch that movie maybe once or 2 times a year unless you have kids, and then you're going to be binge watching it every single day. But if you want to watch The Mandalorian, sure, subscribe to Disney Plus. A lot of people did, and people left as soon as the Disney Plus subscription as soon as they didn't need it anymore because The Mandalorian was no longer on. But Disney has been complained about as not having enough content. They've only been making movies for the past 8 years. They have not only bought entire franchises like Star Wars and National Geographic, but I mean, they've been producing things under their own Disney brand for a long time. So suddenly we're expecting Disney to not have enough content anymore. It's because people have been watching it. They know what it is. You could watch Free Solo and think, oh, that's really cool. That's a National Geographic type thing. Awesome. Oh, I've already seen the Avengers. I've already seen Star Wars. I've already seen, most of these movies. Do I need to see them again? So a lot of people are leaving the Disney Plus subscription service simply because they don't think they have enough content. So new content is needed. Now imagine a movie theater owned by, let's just say, YouTube. And imagine you are watching a movie that has a topic of, let's say, pranksters. Well, YouTube happens to have a lot of channels that are dedicated to pranks. So they could very easily do advertisements before their theaters, before their showings of those prankster channels. If you happen to do a movie on podcasting, well, wouldn't it be kind of cool if advertisements were more podcast related? Like, oh, you want to subscribe to a certain podcast YouTube channel, learn about sound by doing this. Or you have, let's say, cinematography. Someone, 8mm comes out and it's talking about cameras and camera angles. Or, imagine if Peter McKinnon was, his channel was advertised before, simply because he's talking about how to make your camera stuff better. YouTube is a big place for education after all, right? I mean, that's how probably most of you found me. But I will add that if that's what YouTube has at their disposal right there, they could very easily do channel ads, or perhaps that could be a benefit to a YouTube content creator. If you wanted to advertise before a movie, imagine that, not just locally, but even though they could do it locally, they could say, like, if you have a New York-based YouTube channel and you're going to be streaming at, a movie at the YouTube movie theater, they could very easily advertise a New York-based YouTube channel, and that could be something that they might actually approach. And it could be something cool because they don't have to spend any money on it, and yet it would produce content which they make money off of because they monetize those channels. Now, content creators are doing better in many ways than professionals. I mean, we've seen the news, how bad the news people are producing stuff from home. Their television, their video looks like garbage. Their sound sounds like garbage. And I mean, it's a joke in many, many ways. But YouTube content creators have been creating stuff for a long time and having to take it up to the next level because people's expectations of movies and television keep going up to the next level. 25 years ago, we did not have CGI in television. And then it started to get introduced. And now we have entire TV shows that are practically digital. Entire TV shows. And I'm not talking about animation. I'm talking about things that are like Game of Thrones, that are a lot of digital elements in it. So just throwing it back to Game of Thrones. But not just that, content creators are doing some of the best fan films online. One of my favorite Star Wars ones is Darth Maul Apprentice. I'll put a link down in the description for that one if you've never seen it. It talks a little bit about the last challenge that Darth Maul faced before he earned the title Darth. It's awesome. If you've never seen it, definitely check it out. Now, also, Vice has done a lot of better documentaries than you have seen on many of these documentary channels because they still have to answer to the network. They still have that ultimate censorship from the network and the moneymakers and perhaps the interest of the people that own those channels. Those are something that they have to take into consideration. But yet when Vice did their documentary about North Korea, or I should say multiple documentaries on North Korea, that's something that they've done better than many TV channels. Now, you've also probably seen things like The Irishman, the de-aging video that somebody did in their spare time at their house. They did a better de-aging process on, Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro and those guys that were in the movie of The Irishman. They did better de-aging than the big time, CGI people did, probably because they said, oh no, you can't make them look too old. You can't take too much off of them. Otherwise it doesn't look realistic. Well, if you've not seen that de-aging video, it looks a lot better. They could have gotten away with it. And if you have someone that is just like Orson Welles was with Citizen Kane way back in the 30s, if you have complete creative control over your movie, you can do whatever you want to, and it's going to be amazing. Maybe not the movie itself, because, that was an outlier. But if you don't have to answer to anyone that tells you you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that for money reasons or for whatever, then you can have a lot more creative control. That's one of the reasons why these content creators are able to produce such amazing things on YouTube, because they only answer to themselves, provided that they want it to be monetized. I mean, you can't go out there and do stuff that's completely illegal, because you'll get shut down for that. However, you could still make a lot of movies and content with the creativity you want to bring to it. Now, television used to pull together content, cable television especially. Like, you'd have networks that would come together and, like NBC, ABC, CBS, if we want to go back to old school, those channels, when cable television first came out, the idea was to pull it all together in a service that you could pay for. And what's interesting is when Ted Turner was this little small television station owner of TBS, which no one ever heard of, when cable television came along, they said to a lot of the big channels, if you want to subscribe to our cable service, then you're going to have the ability to watch all of these channels, ABC, CBS, NBC, WGN, WOR, those were something you had to pay like $2.49 when I was coming up if you wanted to see those stations, even though it was like weather out of Chicago or New York. But it was also coupled in with the Weather Channel. So if you wanted the Weather Channel, you had to pay $2.49 more. But that was something that a lot of people did. I know that we did in my household, simply to have the Weather Channel. But Ted Turner, nobody knew who he was. And he did the brilliant thing of saying, while most channels were saying, well, if you want my channel to be on your cable television thing, you're going to have to buy it. Well, what Ted Turner did was he said, I'm going to give it away. I'm going to give you my signal for free. You don't owe anything, because he was able to then charge, advertising costs for nationwide distribution. So his even though in the early days, it was basically just watching Smokey and the Bandit on rerun, and, those weird shows, you're like, what in the world is this? That was a lot of the early content on TBS. And if you watch it on cable, you're like, oh, it's Smokey and the Bandit channel again. That was very much what it was like watching TBS. But he was able to charge advertising rates nationwide simply by giving his signal away. Now, you could say that streaming did that too, but now it's kind of splitting up. Netflix is not going to be carrying stuff from every single channel, because everyone wants to do their own streaming service now. So the whole idea of pulling everybody together for the cable system, and if you wanted to subscribe to HBO, Cinemax, Showtime, the Movie Channel, Disney Channel, all those things back in like the 80s and 90s, and then Sports Center and stuff later, you could get the football pass, and watch all the premium football content, whatever the case may be. Now it's starting to go away, because people are pulling their videos, their movies, their television shows off of these subscription platforms in order to launch their own. But now let me pull back into that again, because there is still a need for the cinematic releases. Universal may have to buy theaters, or just simply do video on demand, and, might as well be as well online at that point, because there's going to be an interest in seeing your movies in theaters still, whether you believe it or not. Now, with a lot of this, these stations launching new streaming services, you got to fill it up content-wise, because remember, people are already disappointing that Disney is running out of content for them to watch, because they've been flooded with it their entire lives. This could lead to new careers for creative content creators. Not just people like Rhett and Link with their Good Mythical Morning buddy system show, or Vsauce's Minefield. Those are more premium type, once you've gotten millions of subscribers and they say, hey, we'd like to actually get you to do a show specifically for us and pay you for it. I'm talking something different. Imagine videos that are played before movies, short films, for example. Previews get you to the theater, but then you suddenly have advertisements for your own content. Imagine an advertisement for Stranger Things before something that would be in a Netflix theater. I've kind of already visited this, so I'll venture on. Now, let's talk about Google Play for a moment, or iTunes Store, something like that. Imagine if they decided to join in too, because they have a store that they can make money off of as well. They might just diversify in order to stay viable, just like many other people do with their incomes, for example, and investments. Game conventions in theaters could lead to new competitions. People have been going to things like Dragon Con and Comic Con for decades now, because they want to see the stuff that they geek out about. Well, what about video game conventions? Couldn't they be done in movie theaters? Imagine if once per month, Steam owned, let's say, 15 movie theaters nationwide, one big movie theater in every single major city in America. And they decided to have and sponsor a very big gaming convention where, let's just say, Fortnite is the top game, because I'm not a gamer. I don't know what the best game is out there right now. Let's just say Fortnite. And they decided to have a Fortnite competition, and you wanted to enroll in that to see if you were going to be the best. You spend 5 hours at the movie theater and you play Fortnite against a few people, and someone switches live back and forth, or maybe splits the big, huge movie screen into 6 or 8 different parts, and you can watch people play and compete in Fortnite live there at a movie theater. Then your next person comes up and tries out. Then the next person gets up there and tries out, and whoever wins might get like a free pass to the movie theater for a year, or they might get, if it was sponsored by Steam, for example, or Google Play, you might get free content on their on their service, whatever it happens to be. Wouldn't that be kind of cool? There's already Fathom events where you can have people sit nationwide in a theater and watch the Boston Symphony Orchestra or the London Symphony Orchestra. You could watch a play or whatever the case may be, a conversation, a masterclass live and Q&A. If they can do a Fathom event like that, why couldn't they do the same kind of thing with Steam and video games? Imagine The Hobbit read by someone like Andy Serkis on YouTube. Okay, well, that recently happened. Now imagine The Hobbit read by the entire movie cast in a theater. Wouldn't that be kind of cool to watch? I mean, especially if it was kind of rehearsed a little bit, kind of like the movie, and you had someone like Richard Attenborough reading the actual story itself, and then the actors simply did their lines. Wouldn't that be really cool? I mean, could you imagine the geeks out there? I mean, I certainly wouldn't do that kind of thing. Not at all. But there would certainly be a lot of people interested, right? Especially if it was done for charity. Now, imagine homeschooling and digital learning. Well, that's something that we've been doing a lot of recently, right? I mean, the school system recently just got through finishing up for the school year. And if that's the case, and we have all this digital learning that's been done, imagine if that was done in a movie theater. You can rent out a movie theater for a corporate event. Why not rent it out for something like homeschooling if there was something in particular you wanted the kids to see? Online school has been pretty interesting because, like, my daughters are not being instructed by their teachers anymore. They're watching video tutorials that are pre-approved of by the county, and they're learning the content that they need to. They're learning what they need to for their tests. And in many ways, you could say my girls have not had as much of teacher contact. It's been like they'll send an email and maybe the teacher will respond back, but it's also been they'll send an email and the teacher won't bother responding for another week. Believe it or not, that's happened. And I've helped my daughters with projects before and said, what's your grade on that? Hasn't been graded yet. Well, wasn't the deadline yesterday? Yep. That's why we turned it in yesterday. Okay. And like 4 or 5 days later, they get a grade on it. Well, if digital learning is being done online, what's to say that the government, who already is producing videos or has approved of certain videos for the education of children, what's to say they won't suddenly start cutting education costs because it's being done online? And if American teachers are demanding too much as salaries, what if they start outsourcing that too? Outsourcing is, of course, a big thing. What if they started saying, well, instead of a class of maybe 30 students that you're teaching, or maybe let's just say you're teaching one subject to, let's say 50 students or 100 students, what if they suddenly said one teacher is now going to be responsible for 250 students? If you're not teaching in class and repeating the same material over and over again, then you could teach more students and simply spend your time, instead of actually teaching the subject, you could spend your time instead answering their questions and follow-up emails. What's to say that's far-fetched? It very well could be the future. Who knows? Now, internet could at some point then be provided by the government for purposes of education, like you're limited to just educational websites. You think that's far-fetched? What if we played the safety card and said, oh, no, kids cannot possibly return to school? And you said, well, geez, I don't have the money to get internet, so my kids can't do school. Okay. COVID-19 has taught us quite a few things. And one of those things is that we can easily pull the safety card and say my kids have to stay home. And then if you don't have the money for education, that may drive an internet ISP to be sponsored by the government to maybe broadcast out in the air, or maybe there would be government subsidizations to get internet that is limited just to Education. Perhaps. I mean, you've seen people online bragging about how the school shootings are down. Well, you want to play the safety card? Go for it. School shootings are down because kids aren't in school. What are people going to do? Go into the school and start trying to, cause trouble when there's no one there? No one's going to do that. Bullying has always been there online, but those of us who do not let their kids just run free on social media may say, well, geez, they still need to have that social interaction with friends, so streaming things like video games may be something you have to do. You still have to want to get your kids out to maybe play with other kids out in the real world. But yet, people are used to police being at places like movie theaters and conventions. It's safer against, random shootings, right? Okay. So if we're going to play the safety card, we could very easily say there's less teachers needed, and therefore those teachers are now being outsourced. The best teacher for your school might not live in your area. They may live at the other side of the world. And if that's the case, why not hire that person because they're the best teacher for you, and it's all going to be online anyway. I know a lot of people teach English online. My brother does it. And so what's to say that if he can teach online English classes from this side of the planet to the other side of the planet, what's to say that my daughters who are in school aren't going to be taught by teachers that are on the other side of the planet who might have better grades than the teachers that they currently have? If you're not seeing them in person, what does it matter if that teacher is good at what they do and they're able to teach and respond quickly to emails? Then you could very well end up with a situation like that. College is expensive, right? Going to college, spending $25,000 per year might be something of the past, because if you're going online and doing more online classes, there's not going to be those big overheads anymore. It's not going to be where teachers are able to put their own political views or own whatever thoughts out there and their own weird idiosyncrasies out there into the class, or not even stick to the class material. I picked a fight with a few of my teachers back in college because they were not sticking to what was in the syllabus. They decided they were going to teach whatever they wanted to teach, and I rebelled. I was a rebel. Okay, so let's pull this back in a little bit. There's going to be a drive for new content creation by these studios. No cost to stations. No, nothing like that. The stations have nothing to lose if you contact a content creator and say, hey, would you like to produce content and share some of our profits? Well, geez, could you imagine if someone were to approach me? I wouldn't do this because I'm not going to do this kind of thing. But if you would imagine someone said, well, Sound Speeds, why don't you produce sound content? We'll pay you, and you just produce a show like once per week, and it could be whatever, and 30 minutes long. Might be kind of interesting. Would I want to do that? No, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. But there's a lot of people out there who are experts in their field that could have a lot of fun doing something like that. Creating content for whoever these streaming services are. No cost to the stations unless, it turns a profit. They could easily pull out some sort of an incentive, kind of like how Google has AdSense, and that's how people make money on YouTube. There could be incentives like that per the amount of views that you generate. And if they were to pay people to do that kind of thing, imagine what that would mean. It means the internet would be paid for potentially by their employers. Imagine an online company wanting you to stream or wanting you to produce content for them on a weekly basis online. They might actually pay for your internet as an incentive. Twitch doesn't allow partners to stream outside of Twitch. So if you want to have a Twitch and a YouTube live stream that goes out to both at the same time, you can't be one of their partners. Okay? Well, if that meant that you had to become a Twitch partner in order to stream on Twitch and they were going to pay you to do so, they might also add an incentive of getting your internet. That might be kind of interesting, right? Platforms may require exclusivity in exchange for rewards. Certain size, of audience might mean that you're hired. More staff then would be needed to monitor these streamers that are now on the clock. More online jobs needs more faster internet, perhaps faster internet without data caps. Remember cell phones back in the day? Like 20 years ago when I first got my cell phone, I very clearly remember paying for 200 anytime minutes and had 1,500 nights and weekends minutes that I could use after 9 p.m. And that was pretty annoying because those daytime minutes were a lot more expensive than the nighttime minutes. And then suddenly they got rid of that. Just kind of like data caps that I'm talking about. Now you're concerned about 5G? Well, fine. Just imagine then nationwide Wi-Fi, faster data lines with Wi-Fi everywhere, so that if I wanted to have my specific Wi-Fi that I wanted to pay for with the provider through, let's just say, Charter Internet, which is who I currently am using. They might set up high-speed data networks with Wi-Fi in malls and in restaurants and stuff. And if I want to use my Wi-Fi there and pay for a service where it's going to be completely nationwide, for example, and not just at my house, that could be something they do to try to make it more viable to not get 5G. Could you imagine that? Faster than 5G speeds without all the health risks that people are all concerned and freaking out about. But that would also mean more regulation, because we already talked about education potentially be one of those online things, so it would have to be regulated, right? So more online jobs means more at home, because people have already said that jobs that cannot be done from home are now considered essential. You should be able to work from home on this job, and that could lead to quite a few things. It's smart having employees working out of the house because you don't have to have two half-used places. You spend the evenings in your house and you go to work during the day. It's better just to have one facility that you stay in all the time. Might as well be your house and work, right? That way you don't have to leave your house and have double air conditioning all day, or double the internet, double the everything, and, clog up the entire roads system, while you're going to work. That's kind of interesting. You could argue that the cooler temperatures we've been having lately is because we've been driving less. I'm sure there's people that are going to love to argue that for global warming purposes. Cars have been off the roads for 2.5 months in a lot less numbers. That's why it's no longer as hot. That's why we're having a cooler year. Has nothing to do with the sunspots we're supposed to be having up into the year 2025. No, of course not. Has to do with COVID-19. Government incentives for stay-at-home workers may become a reality. Less office space being used might mean those offices closing or combining more flex use spaces where, for example, you might have an office that you have to go into 2 days a week and then you work from home the rest. And then your desk might not be an office at your office anymore. It might be that you have a desk that 2 days ago was someone else's and tomorrow it's going to be someone else's. And you just bring in your laptop, you sit down, you put it in a cradle and you start working. Perhaps. Who knows? Well, if these office spaces start closing, that means that people are going to be selling off land, or maybe, doing a rezoning and making it more residential. So that way people will have more nicer houses. Less social interaction means less immunity to diseases. Maybe working out less now, but is that because you've been stuck at home? What if your employer happened to provide you with a gym membership because they can't do that as an incentive at work anymore? Imagine LA Fitness suddenly getting a contract for all your employees. That could be one of those incentives, just like paying for your home internet. There's that thing again. It could be something that is very, very likely to remain something in the future. Paying your internet is an incentive because you're using it from home. Now, there's still more need for health and cooking services, so people are going to be ordering out. People are going to like their online grocery stores. Webvan, I'm sorry, you were a couple of decades early. People are using their social skills less and less, and they're going to become more and more dependent on tech. Houses are going to become more expensive, and residential land will then become more important again, and so the price is going to go up more on that. City living will decline if people are able to do it more from a rural area that's safer, and you don't have to worry about it because if you're not going out, you're having food and everything delivered. Why not move into a residential area that's in the middle of the rural area and have a much healthier living? This could also mean that your home insurance goes right. Auto insurance companies have already been refunding up to 20% simply because you're not driving as much because of this whole COVID-19 thing and shutdown. Home power costs are probably going to go up. And office home work allowances? Imagine that. Well, people that are at home are going to be probably relying more on solar panels as the future goes on, because you can monitor it if you're living there, right? It might be essential for you to cut the costs. Now, one thing will rise: vacations. Travel costs are probably going to go up. Think Disney World is expensive now? Well, imagine how much more expensive it's going to be after this whole thing lifts, if this whole thing happens and people are working at home. Crime will likely change. There's a lot of car break-ins as people are going to work and their cars are broken into. People are now going to see more home armed invasions, people breaking into people's houses. So it continues through everything. Now, where does it stop? Follow the money. The economic stimulus cost us $2 trillion. Now, the breakdown is on the screen right there. Now, the federal budget for the year was supposed to be $4.829 trillion, but they only received $3.863 trillion, which gives us a deficit of $966 billion. And that's before the whole $2 trillion stimulus thing. Oh, that changed some stuff. Now, you think that things change in the workplace? Okay, imagine these small business loans to pay employees. People are making more money on unemployment. And then Grubhub and Uber Eats and those guys are going to go completely hog wild, making more and more money, which means that if you've stood in any of these lines, those people are pushing their way up to the front because they're trying to make a living by delivering people's food. And so that means that people have gotten a little bit ruder with regards to people standing in front of me at restaurants while I've been waiting for my food. That might even increase the prices for deliveries, because with the demand going up and the supply going down, the price is going to go up. And what does that mean? People are going to hire more. And services like Grubhub and Uber Eats are going to probably end up being phased out more as these restaurants are starting to be delivering themselves. Chick-fil-A in my area is already offering home delivery of stuff if you order at least $5 of food. Jimmy John's has been offering that if you buy one sandwich, they'll deliver that. And that's been going on for a long time. Now, that's not necessarily the best for the driver, who you do not actually have to tip. It's considered to be optional, and there's no integrated delivery fee. But geez, I guess they're getting paid by the company, right? Who knows? Hopefully, it'll lead to more tipping. Service industries with people at home, that's one of the reasons why we have this meat shortage thing, where people have not been going into work. So now we don't produce as much meat, and that's driving the costs up. I saw an article about a UK Wendy's that's taking burgers off the menu. Believe me, essential is relevant. You see, everything is changing. We'll see businesses go bankrupt, and not just the big companies. We're seeing a lot of small businesses go bankrupt simply because they're no longer considered to be important and viable because they don't have people lobbying to keep them open. The big companies are going to want to stay viable and essential, so they're going to continue to say, keep us open, but close the small businesses. We can't afford pre-COVID-19 living? This changes everything forever after? Okay, let's take this full circle. What about indies? Small budget movies produced by people like you and me. Is this the death of indies? A lot of people that I know in the film industry have said, well, geez, this is going to be the end of small cinema. You really think so? Remember, most big movie theaters don't show indies now. Small art houses, those kind of places do. But you could very easily urge YouTube or one of these other content creation, companies that could potentially buy up movie theaters to remember their roots. The small people that put, their home movies and videos up on YouTube, for example. Those people might somehow go viral and create millions of views that they make money off of. New companies might buy these theaters, and they'll probably consider indies simply because it's content that's already produced and ready for streaming. So streaming and looking for content? How about these Star Trek and Star Wars fan films? Oh, wait a minute, forgot that. Those are already licensed ideas, and you couldn't do that. But perhaps there could be a venture for somebody like Disney Plus to allow these Star Wars fan films to make their way onto their service if they need more content. Keep your ideas flowing. They're definitely needed. As for compensation, okay, well, let's talk about compensation for a second. And I'm going to talk about the film industry workers here for a second, because we're considered to be non-essential, right? Well, getting us back to work and producing content for you to see, that's considered essential. Tyler Perry has talked about this and said, I'm going to take my Fort McPherson base that used to be a military base and allow people to stay there without leaving the facility or without leaving Fort McPherson at all while we do this television show. That's one way to get people back to work. You think you're going to save money? No. There's been a lot of people that have talked about what this is going to cost to production companies. Are they going to suddenly cut back on crew? Are we going to... there's been a lot of drastic things, and I'll spare all this drama because it really is just, forethoughts, people thinking about things and brainstorming, but it doesn't make any sense going forward. Let the truth be known. But here's what I will say. You cannot save money by imposing more safety standards. You think you're going to save money by requiring people to leave their homes and live basically at your Fort McPherson place? No, because you're going to have to pay people to be away from their families. Sure, it's not a distant hire situation. And sure, yeah, you may live in your same city, but there's going to have to be compensation for people who are going to be taken away from their families and basically put into a place where all you're doing is working and not really going anywhere and doing anything anymore. There's going to have to be some sort of compensation for that, just for you to be able to make your movies and television shows. We can't be expected to increase sanitation and wipe down wires and transmitters and everything when you're cutting the staff to our department. So film industry, people that are thinking about doing that, sure, go for it. That's fine. You're never going to make your day again. So no, you can't help when you put these articles out there that are from the bigwigs that have never ever been on a film set except to visit. You don't understand the way it is on set. Just like everyone out there that doesn't understand that the pre-COVID-19 world is going to change everything going forward. Rant done. Since I talked so long about the future of entertainment and still didn't get out everything that I had hoped to, and no, that's not my cue to continue where I left off, I'm going to keep story time relatively short and discuss how the old password to my bank account used to be a string of profanity. A few years ago, I was working on a movie called The Founder, starring Michael Keaton. And during a long lighting setup, I was trying to reset the bank account username and password because it's one of those banks where as soon as you put in your password, it says it can't be one of the past 12 and it can't be anything similar to the past 12. And it's got to have an uppercase, a lowercase, include punctuation, all these different things so difficult that you can't even remember the thing. And you are forced to do something less secure like write the thing down or put it in your phone. So anyway, I was trying to reset my password, and despite the fact that I had never used a password other than the one password I was using, the bank did not like any password I entered. And I kept talking to them on the phone saying, can you reset it? Can you do anything on your end so that it stops throwing these error messages? I would put in 1, 2, 3, 4, uppercase, lowercase, letter, whatever. And it still didn't like it, even though my password was nothing like it. I put in exactly different letters, different numbers, different combinations of punctuation. It still didn't like it. Short passwords, long passwords, it did not matter. And so finally, out of absolute frustration, I just entered a string of profanity on my phone. Luckily, I happened to remember it because my bank's computer accepted it and said, you have successfully changed your password. I did have to write down that string of profanity for a couple of weeks because I would never remember it otherwise. But luckily, I happened to just long enough to log out and log back in after I did my banking just to verify that I remembered it correctly. And luckily, I did because that was terrible. Anyway, thank you for tuning into the SoundSpeeds Podcast, episode 11, and be sure to tune in the future for more fun stories and, well, I would say sound advice, but that's the way I kind of end my regular show. So why don't I just say thanks for tuning in and just listen to the outro. Hit subscribe for more content both here and on SoundSpeeds.